So, closing out today in the final session of our 2023 Definiti Retirement Academy is Tara Carlton with a primer for new plan sponsors. Tara, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody.
There we go.
So my session is meant for the new plan sponsors or new office managers or anybody who's just starting with the retirement plan. Maybe they have never used it before or worked on it before. So that's kind of the idea behind my session. So we're just going to start with the first slide. And I know Jen already kind of went over this, so I'm going to go through the plan sponsor link quickly. You can go to the next slide.
Well, we do have some people that joined us a little late, and we do
Okay.
have a few extra minutes, so don't
Okay.
feel the need to rush.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, very good. Well, I will try to go slower then. For the plan sponsor link, this is just kind of a reminder to make sure that everybody knows that they need to go through plan sponsor link in order to be able to send us the census and the questionnaire that we will ask for that each year. It's not a one and done, but we do need that census information every year because obviously it changes from year to year. So it is something that you will get each at the end of each year or beginning of the following year. And we're going to be asking for that information. It's also a reminder that we do have a website that has a blog on it. It has an ERISA Connections newsletter and the annual limits, just to kind of make sure everybody understands that they can go out to our website and get some education if they're needing some. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Distributions are always a question that we get with brand new plan sponsors. And essentially the idea is that you're going to go when an employee terminates, you're going to make sure that you give them termination paperwork from your record keeper. And we will make sure that once they fill out that information, you'll send it back to us through Plan Sponsor Link. There is a person, quote unquote person, that you can send it to called exclamation point DC withdrawals. And so you can send it to that person and it'll go to our withdrawal team directly. But we don't talk to participants. So we want to make sure that you guys provide that data to the participant, make sure that you're helping them with getting the information that they need and them filling it out and then sending it back to us. So once they get that back to you, you'll send it through Plan Sponsor Link. But if you have an active employee, somebody who's not terminated, you're going to make sure that you can get them an end service form or a hardship form, whatever your plan allows for. You'll get that to them directly. They'll fill it out. Again, they'll give it back to you. You'll send it back to us through Plan Sponsor Link. That is just, the Plan Sponsor Link is going to come up quite often because that's how you'll send us data, is through that link. You can go to the next slide. Just a reminder, we don't talk to the participants, so we do communicate directly with our main contact that we have. So you will act as that middleman with the participant and us. We do recommend that you get a personal email address and a cell phone number from that person, because typically when somebody leaves employment, they may have only been using their work email address, but it's a good way to get them notices after they terminate or distribution paperwork. Typically, people don't change their personal email address or their cell phone number. So when you do need to get a hold of them, it's good to collect that data from them before they leave. And then just another reminder to make sure you have beneficiary forms on file and to keep them updated. It's good to kind of revisit that every 3 years, but especially if somebody is going through a divorce or just got married, it's good to have them complete a beneficiary form and make sure that they have that on file. We can go on to the next slide. So the annual questionnaire is a section of Plan Sponsor Link that Jen showed you all earlier. And it has several questions in it, and several of those questions trip people up. They do have questions after reading through them, like, why are you asking me this? So I kind of wanted to hit a few of them. One of the questions is, does the spouse or child have ownership in another company? They always want to know why that matters. Well, it matters because it might make your plan a control group, depending on what the ownership situation is and how it's all laid out. We need to know that information so we can make sure that we're properly administering your plan if you have a control group situation. So it's good for us to have that information so that way we can make sure we're properly documenting that in your document. Fidelity bonds, which we've already kind of talked about a little bit today, but with fidelity bonds, you need to make sure that you have one. There are two different kinds of bonds. There's one called a fiduciary bond, and that's typically what people have. They have a fiduciary bond because a fiduciary bond protects the owner from employees stealing from you, and a fidelity bond does the reverse. So you have to have a fidelity bond in order to have a retirement plan, and most of the time you can get that from your insurance agent that's helping you with all your other insurance. And it's not typically all that expensive, so it's good to have on hand. And then for contribution questions that we get, sometimes we get the question of, well, I don't know what I did. So if the company made an employer contribution, so that means not the money that comes out of the paychecks, which is called a deferral, because you're deferring money from a paycheck, so that's called a deferral. It would be the money that comes from the employer that they're paying into the plan. So that is an employer contribution, and if you make that per payroll period, then you've been making it all year long. But sometimes you just want us to calculate it, and that's fine. So there's a question that'll ask you, did you make them during the year, or do you want us to calculate it? And so you'd have to answer yes or no, depending on what your situation is. And then one of the other questions that we get is, what is the difference between a safe harbor match and a safe harbor non-elective? Or maybe people interchange that wording, and they do mean two different things. So I think you can go to the next slide, actually. Yep. So the difference between a match and a non-elective, and it does matter which one it is, because with a match, you are literally matching what the employee did. So the employee has to defer. Again, a deferral is one that comes out of the paycheck. So they're deferring money out of the paycheck. So they have to defer in order to receive a match, because you're saying, hey, if Mr. Participant, if you want to put in money yourself, that's great. I'll give you some extra money as a bonus because I want you to put your own skin in the game. So we're matching those contributions. A non-elective means that it goes to everybody who's eligible. They don't have to put their own money in. They don't have to defer themselves. They would get a safe harbor non-elective regardless of if they put their own money in, if they're eligible for the plan. And then, and so that's an important piece because they are different. They are treated differently, and they have different deposit situations. So, deferral deposits need to be deposited within 7 business days. If they're any later than that, then they consider, ERISA would say, oh, well, you're borrowing from your participant. So, I mean, that may not be what you're actually doing. You might just be on vacation, or you may have just forgot. But deferrals need to be deposited. And again, a deferral is money that comes out of the participant's paycheck. So the employee portion, that needs to be deposited within 7 business days. And if it's any later than 7 business days, then it's considered a late deposit. There's lost earnings. There's a 5330 that has to be filed. And all of those things cost extra money. So my suggestion is you just make your deposit within 7 business days. And if you're out on vacation, maybe train somebody else to be able to do it, so that way you don't have that problem. And then bonuses, if you give your employees a Christmas bonus, let's say, if they are already deferring out of their paycheck, let's just say 3%, then you need to take 3% out of their bonus, unless they provide you a form that states that they don't want to have money taken out of their bonus. It's not a management decision, it's an employee decision. So management can't come in and say, okay, well, everybody's going to get a bonus, but we're not going to take deferrals out of that. You don't get to make that decision. The employees have to make that decision. So they would provide you with a form that says they don't want to have money come out of their bonus, but they do want their regular deferrals to stay the same, and that's fine. And we can provide you with that form. But you guys, as an owner, you can't make that decision. You have to let the employee make that decision. So we will move on to census. Just as a reminder, when we get the questionnaire and the census through Plan Sponsor Link, one of the things we always get is the census is missing the owner. And they'll say, well, I'm not an employee. You still are. In the world of 401k plans, owners are still the employee. You still received compensation. You still deferred money out of your paycheck, still worked your 2,000 hours for the year. You're still an employee. So we still need you in the census. So you can't leave yourself off. You have to be on there. And then dates of hire and dates of birth matter. We do have clients that ask us, why do we need that information? Well, if you have an eligibility requirement that says that you have to be 21 years of age in order to be able to enter into the plan, we need to know how old everybody is. We would also need to know how old everybody is if you have a retirement age in your plan, and most plans do, of 65. How do we know that they're normal retirement age if we don't have their date of birth? The other issue is that when somebody turns 72, they have to have a required minimum distribution. We don't know if they're age 72 unless we have their date of birth. So dates of birth matter. Dates of hire matter, because if you have an eligibility requirement that says they have to wait for a whole year before they can enter into the plan, we need to know when they were hired. And so all of these things matter. We don't ask these things for fun. We're asking them because we need them for either to calculate eligibility or calculate your contribution. So we're asking them for a reason. Same thing goes for hours. We ask for hours because sometimes your eligibility requirement is you have to have 1,000 hours in order to be able to enter into the plan. We don't know if they're eligible if they don't have 1,000 hours listed in the hours department or in the hours column. Hours also matter for vesting. Some plans require that you have 1,000 hours in order to get a year of vesting. If we don't have hours, we don't know how many years of vesting that employee has. So the other thing that we're finding is that some people are putting just the weekly hours, so they'll just put 40 in there, but we need the whole year. So we don't know if some weeks that person maybe worked 40 hours and then another week they worked 20 and then another week they worked 10 and then another week they worked 50. We don't know that. And so you can't just put 40 in there. We have to have the full year's worth of hours. You're putting in a full year of compensation. You're putting in a full year of deferrals. You're putting in a full year of match. You're giving us the full year of dates. Hours should be the full year as well. Employee deferrals are needed. We do get questions of, well, can't you just look at what was deposited at American Funds where my money is held? We could, but what we don't know is, did that match what was on your payroll report? What is taken out of each individual person's check should be what's deposited. And most of the time it is. But sometimes, because we're all human, you end up depositing Johnny Smith's money into Jane Smith's account. They're really close together. You got one line off. It happens. And maybe you only did it 1 week, but this is how we catch it. This is how we find out that what came out of the payroll report doesn't match what was deposited. And we find the error at the end of the year when we do our reconciliation. So yes, we do want your deferral amounts and your match amounts out of the payroll system, not just what was taken from your record keeper. And then last part on census is compensation. We do want gross compensation, including any bonuses that took place. And typically a payroll report would include those bonuses. but it isn't always what's on box 1 of on your W-2, because sometimes that has different deductions that come out of it. So we do want your gross compensation, and that typically can come out of your payroll system without an issue. We can go to the next slide. This is just a section that I kind of want to make sure everybody knows. If you are working on the retirement plan on a regular basis, these 4 things would be really good for you to know off the top of your head. So I would recommend that you know these things and learn them so that you have a good idea of what's going on. And if you don't know them, but you want to learn, reach out to your RPC and they can help you with the information. But you want to make sure how to determine when someone is eligible in that plan. You might have a 1-year wait with 1,000 hours. You need to make sure you know that that's what it is. You also need to know when they enter into the plan. Sometimes that's January, sometimes it's July, sometimes it's quarterly. Sometimes people say they only want their employees to wait 90 days because it goes with their health insurance. Every plan can be different. Whatever you had at a previous job might be completely different in this job. So it's good to know what your plan document for this particular company says for eligibility. Also, it's good to know what the employer contribution is, whether that's a safe harbor contribution or it's a discretionary contribution that you guys have had in the past. You know, you might be doing your own thing and that's fine, but every person that's working on the retirement plan regularly should know what that amount is. And then you should also know what kind of distribution types your plan allows. Not all plans allow all distribution types. So just because your previous employer may have allowed loans, that doesn't mean that this one does. Just because your previous employer allowed hardship doesn't mean that this one does. So it's good to take a note of what distribution types are allowed out of each plan. And then it's also good if you have the ability to access your record keeper online. So if you have American Funds or John Hancock or Nationwide or Voya, I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch, but any of those online platforms that allow people to have access to them, you should be able to know how to get on, have a username and password, and learn how to submit contributions to the record keeper. It's always good to know certain things like that and just play around with it. Learn how to get statements, learn how to get balances, just kind of play around with that online record keeper. And if you're in a plan that has statements that get mailed to you and you want to switch to a situation in which they are online, reach out to your retirement plan consultant and they can help you with that transition too. They'll get you in the right direction because it does give your employees a lot of flexibility and resources that they won't have if all they're getting are the statements that get mailed to you each month. The online platforms really do allow a lot of options to do some education for their employees. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then what is my next slide? Okay, yes. So important dates. So we've got October and November-ish. We'll send out some information about annual notices. So remember that your annual notices and participant fee disclosures need to be handed out by December 1st if you're a 1231 plan. And so you'll get information on that. So you kind of need to be looking for that. But every fall, those notices come out, and those are things that need to be handed out. And then somewhere at the end of December, early January, we'll send out an email asking for that annual questionnaire and census that we've talked about all day. We do really need that every year, and the faster you get it into us, the faster we can work on it. If your plan requires any kind of testing, like you've been told in the past that your discrimination testing failed, we definitely need it by January 31st to ensure that we have enough time to actually review the census and run the test and communicate to you if you need to do refunds. March 15th are when those corrective refunds are due. That is the technical date. However, most record keepers require that we have their forms to them by like March 10th. So it says March 15th, but that is the real date. But in reality, we have to send the forms back a lot sooner than that. So, and then July 31st is when your Form 5500 is due if we don't send an extension to them. That is the IRS tax form that we complete for you. We prepare it for you, but you'll have to sign it unless you're 316. You'll have to sign it electronically, and we'll send you the information on how to do that. But we'll prepare it for you, and you just need to review and sign, and it'll get submitted that way. If you extend because we don't have the data from you in a timely manner, if you're an audited plan that requires a third-party audit, then that extension date is October 15th. So we can extend it if needed. I think that's all of my slides. Yes. Are there any questions for me?
Any questions for Tara? Well, all right. That concludes our spring semester of the Definiti Retirement Academy. So thank you so much, Tara, for closing that out for us. I would like to thank all our presenters, actually. So thank you, Jen Cross and Leslie Draper, for taking your time out and presenting to our plan sponsors and clients today. Thank you all for attending. Look forward to details on the fall semester of the Definiti Retirement Academy happening this November. And please watch your emails for a follow-up containing a link to watch the replay of all the sessions from days 1 and 2. Thank you guys, and you have a great rest of your week. See you soon.